Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Wilbur Talks FPL, where we talk everything Premier League, and of course, we love a bit of FPL. We are back for a new season. It's been a while, a nice summer break, but we're all back ready for a new season. Maybe less so as a Man United fan, but I'm sure Charlie and Sam joining me will be more excited for the season ahead. So we are back, full complement with all three of us. So welcome back, Charlie and Sam. How are you both doing?
Thank you very much. Yes, glad to be back. Ready for some football again.
Yeah, ready to go. Bring on the Premier League.
Yeah, much needed, but obviously a shout out to the England's women's team who did very well at the weekend, showing the men how it's done. So, hasn't been all bad over the summer. So, I think we're going to dive straight into it, and we're going to, as I hinted on, I feel like this season might be a bit more positive for you two compared to me to start with, but we shall see. So, I think we'll start with Sam, whose team I would expect out of the three of us to finish higher. It would be quite a bad season for them if they didn't. How are you looking forward to the new season, Sam, especially after Community Shield, and how are you expecting Liverpool to get on?
Yeah, good to be back. Thanks for having us back for another season, Will. Appreciate it. Community Shield was obviously a very enjoyable afternoon. I wouldn't read too much into it, though. I think Man City were probably 50% at best, but obviously good to get off to winning ways in a semi-competitive game against what is inevitably going to be one of our rivals coming into the season. So that is encouraging. I am very optimistic about this season. I think last season was incredible from Liverpool fans' perspective. Fighting on all fronts in all competitions until the last day of the season, and were literally moments away from potentially winning a quadruple. And in my immediate reaction at the end of all of it was sort of a little bit of disappointment that it didn't quite materialise for us in the two, what most people would class as bigger competitions. I think in hindsight, the resilience that we showed to get that far, and then having gone and essentially added to the squad over the summer, is a position that I don't think there's any Liverpool fan can be disappointed in, to be honest. I'm very much looking forward to the new season. Have complete trust and faith in the manager, the setup, the club. Bring it on. I think it's going to be right up to the wire again. I think we could see another last day of the season. I think we're going to be up there with City fighting in the top two for the title. Bring it on.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very similar again, isn't it? Two-team shootout, really. I can't realistically think, I can't see both teams dropping off so bad that it becomes even a chance for anyone else. Maybe if there was one runaway team, you might give someone else a chance to catch them up, but the fact that City and Liverpool, I don't expect them both to have a bad season, so definitely a straight fight between those two. I think you mentioned on the review pod that we did at the end of last season as well, I was in the pub with all those last day games going on, and at one stage Liverpool fans were very happy, but thank God it changed. Otherwise, that would have been out of there quite quick. But yeah, you look very good going forward to the season. Where would you say at this point in time you'd finish first or second?
I'm going to stick my neck out. I think they're going to win the league this season. I really do. I think they're going to win it.
Yeah, I feel like City have let certain players go and they need at least one player, maybe two, just a bit of cover. I feel like you've definitely strengthened your squad a bit to hopefully for you, go the whole way and get close to that quadruple as you got very close to last season. But yeah, it looks very positive.
I don't get me wrong, just to butt in that, I don't think we're going to be quadrupling again or in contention for it again. I think that was just an alignment of stars to a certain extent that, you get fortunate in cup draws and you get, fortunate run-outs in certain games and stuff like that. But I would be very surprised if we're talking quadruples come March, April, like they were this season. But, I think a very realistic and a good season would be if they can go and win one of the two big trophies and retain one of the cups we won last year. I think that'd be another good season for us. So very, very much looking forward to it.
Should be good, especially for your side of things. So if we move slightly down the league, Charlie, assuming you're going to finish lower down in the table, how are you looking forward to Arsenal's season? I feel it feels pretty positive from your side of things as well.
Yeah, it does. But by no means at all competing anywhere close or even competing with those two. I think, again, it's going to be the same same old. We'll probably come onto this, but yeah, just those top two separate by quite a distance again. I think this year, it's really down to, I think, probably third and fourth spots. I think up for grabs. I think there's a number of clubs in it: the Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs, Man United. I think I would still put you in contention. Are going to be fighting around for those spots. So I think. Yeah, there's lots, specifically on Arsenal, lots of positive things. Obviously, getting signings done quite early, which is a bit unusual for us. The last couple of seasons, there's been a clear sort of direction change in how our transfer business is done. So getting Jesus in, getting Zinchenko in to the point where they're both ready to kick off the season is a real positive for us. And clearly we've seen... Yeah, I'm a bit hesitant to placing too much focus on what's happened in pre-season, but it at least shows there's a good chemistry between, the attacking players. There's a good idea and understanding of the system that the manager's put in place. So only good feelings about heading into the season. A little bit apprehensive about the first game though. Away at Crystal Palace is not an ideal opening fixture at all, given their fans, the way that they can turn that place into a very difficult place to go. So. Not particularly looking forward to that specifically as an opening game, but in general towards the season, I'm fairly positive.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it, but I feel like Arsenal don't particularly always start well. I think we saw it last season, the way Brentford wasn't at the first game as well, the loss there. And I feel like a tough away game to start them off isn't ideal, but like you said, positive. Definitely from your side. What do you make of the new signings that you've got brought in? Obviously, you've got a standout kind of Jesus, and seem to have got some other decent players like Zinchenko. I don't know about, is it Vieira, whatever you say in midfield. I'm not sure if you say Vieira or Vieri, but
Vieira. Yeah.
What do you make of the actual signings? Like, are they what you needed, kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. They're positions that we definitely needed. Jesus, an obvious one. We got rid of Aubameyang in January. We, like I said, left on a free, and Nketiah he re-signed a new contract, but there's no way, even though he played well towards the end of last season, there's no way we can go into a season with him as our starting striker. Jesus instantly has lifted the level of our attack and seems to be, and this is only going off the a couple of games that we've seen him play, but it seems to be exactly the kind of player that's needed in that position, not just and kind of a number 9, but also pressing and on all the kind of interplay that kind of builds up, that brings other players in. So, for example, Martinelli, I think, will really benefit from the way Jesus plays. Looking at some of the like position maps from our friendlies, it kind of Jesus draws some of the defenders, allowing Martinelli to run on, and Martinelli again is one of the better finishers in the squad. So he fits in really well, and Zinchenko as well, I think is absolutely perfect because Tierney has had such injury problems. And not only that, before the Zinchenko signing, I saw Tierney still as the first choice left back. But after a couple of games, I'm starting to think Zinchenko may well be his spot to lose eventually, because he just fits straight into the Arteta system so well and understands exactly what it is. And I don't know whether that's off the back of them having worked together at Man City or whatever it is. And it's the idea Arteta is basically going for is what Guardiola tries to do with Man City as well. So I don't know if it's that level. Maybe there's just that extra level of understanding that maybe Tierney doesn't quite provide, because he just doesn't play enough really. So yeah, signings put in the right places really. I think we're still looking for, if we can get some money in for moving on some players, we're still looking for some, for example, backup for Saka. We've got Pepe, but he doesn't seem to be a particular favourite of the manager. And yeah, Saka just gets run into the ground, and especially this year with European football on the cards as well, we're going to need to use a big squad. So getting in kind of depth, quality and depth is important, really.
If you're looking at it now, in terms of what's obviously happened in the transfer window and what you think of other teams around you, where would you think you're going to finish this season?
It's tough. I do think we'll finish above your lot. I think we'll finish above United. I think United's such an unknown at the moment. It's clearly a transitional season, and I think obviously you can talk more about it in depth about United. But I just feel from the two clubs, there's much more of a definite thing about Arsenal than there is about United. United could do well, but quite easily could do very poorly. So I feel we'll finish above United. against Spurs and Chelsea, it's a very difficult one. Chelsea, similarly, it's quite an unknown, but it feels like they're starting from a kind of higher place than United are. So I feel like Chelsea should be getting top four. So then it's really between us and Spurs again, and it's very difficult to call. I think it could go either way quite easily. I think one of us will finish fourth, one of us will finish fifth, and won't know until a fair way into the season to find out which way.
Yeah, I'm not fully convinced by Chelsea because I don't particularly see where they're going to score a lot of goals. That's where I'm kind of struggling with them. So I think, similar to you, it's going to be a straight fight kind of between the three teams for that third and fourth position. I feel like any of you three could be third or fourth. It could go any way. And I'll get on to United in a minute, but I think it'll be very much kind of sick. I don't see us getting. Obviously, we can you've seen from previous seasons, we can just go on one of those runs and get us into that kind of position. But looking at the strength of the other teams, I wouldn't expect us to be. Well, I wouldn't confidently expect us to be up there, shall I say? Just while we're on the topic of top four, Sam, what do you make of the kind of battle for top four? Who would you see being in like the third and fourth positions?
Yeah, completely agree with what Charlie said. To be honest, as much as Manchester United fans probably want to hear the fact that they could be in contention for top four, I just don't believe it. I think that Arsenal, Tottenham, and Chelsea have got a lot more of a solid foundation to be building off. They've got consistency from their managers, from at least a season in charge for all of them. They've all recruited reasonably well. And, we talk about Chelsea not being sure where the goals are coming from. I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem if they manage to keep them out. If they're keeping clean sheets and they only need to win, they need to score once. I imagine between Havertz, Werner, Raheem Sterling, Mason Mount, they'll probably find a couple of goals. So, I think Chelsea will finish third, and I think it's going to be Spurs that finish fourth, purely because I think when it comes down to it, the end of last season was big that Spurs managed to get into the top four in that spot where Arsenal had such a chokehold on that position with 3 or 4 games to go. So if you get to a position, and I think they will be in a position where they're right up against each other to the last sort of weeks of the season, I think that could end up having a little bit of a psychological advantage towards Spurs. But equally, it does depend on how they both get on in other competitions as well, how they're prioritised to the end of the season. I think the only positions that are up for debate in the top 6 are whether it's Arsenal or Spurs to finish fourth. And I think I'm going to just say Spurs are going to nick it. But equally, I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal did get there, but I think Spurs will.
Yeah, I think it's very close between those 2 or 3 teams. Pretty similar to what we said about the top 2 as well. It's going to be some close fought things out. Kind of in that top 5, I won't even say top 6. Shall I address the elephant in the room of the team? I'm expecting most of us think we'll finish 6th based on those discussions. Well, could even see, you never know, someone could have a crazy run and we end up 7th, you never know. So kind of like what Sam said, I'm sure a lot of fans from a United point of view would kind of expect and want higher, but I feel like I generally give a more realistic view. I'm not that ambitious. Obviously, if you make great signings, more like, I feel like if we went back 12 months, we'd sign like Varane, and there was kind of a more, because what we've seen previous seasons, like we knew we could finish 2nd or 3rd, but I would argue that's because the quality of the other teams wasn't great, and you can see like your Arsenal, Spurs, and obviously Man City and Liverpool so far ahead now. The other teams have improved a lot, and we've kind of just stagnated and gone backwards. So I feel like this season, obviously with a new manager, is a lot about getting that style in place, get everyone on the same page and how they want to play. I feel like obviously we've changed managers and kind of got stuck into having no kind of structure in how we wanted to play. Like a Solskjaer or someone would just throw all these attacking players on there and just hope they had kind of a magical moment to win us the game. But at least you can see with Ten Hag, he's got a way he wants to play. And I think we just have to accept it's going to take quite a while. And you've got to realistically give him the season to get his style in there. So realistically, I don't think we'll get higher than 6th. As I said, that is being quite contingent. You never know. We could go on a run and break a bit higher. And I think that could also depend on if we make any more signings. Because touching on the signings, I don't have a great issue with the players we've signed. Obviously, Eriksen, you'll take on a free. I quite like Malacia at left back. Martinez, good player. I think it's a player we've bought for the system. I wouldn't say we genuinely needed a centre back, but we don't have a centre back who can play the Ten Hag way kind of thing. And now we've just got way too many centre backs. And obviously, in an ideal world, I'd like to see with the back of Maguire, but no one's going to buy him. So we've got way too many centre backs, and I think we've said it for like the last 2 or 3 years. Like, there's one key position that everybody knows in the whole country that Man United need, and they're just not signing someone in that position. Obviously, we've had the Frankie de Jong story going on for months and months, but even he doesn't play that defensive midfielder. He's more like a box to box. Like, that's his ideal role that he wants to play. So I think we should have been going all out and just trying to get 2 or 3 midfielders in, not just putting your eggs in one basket with Frankie de Jong. So my opinions might change slightly. The fact that the season's starting earlier, so we've kind of still got a month to go in the transfer window. But realistically, unless we signed like a de Jong or another midfielder, and I think another forward player, kind of depending on what happens with Ronaldo as well. I think obviously you want him, but then at the same time, you don't want him for the future, so it's kind of a difficult situation, and obviously no one kind of wants to buy him. So I kind of expect Ronaldo to stay, but I think we should buy at the Randolph if we get kind of an offer in. And I think even if you don't get a fee for him, getting $500,000 off your wage budget a week is just a ridiculous amount. So I think for the transition going forward, him leaving would not be a bad thing. But yeah, if we don't make any signings, and especially midfielder, and especially at like on the wings, especially we've got like Sancho, Rashford, and then you drop down quite a lot to like a Langer. So we need a top quality like winger forward type player as well. So without them, I can't see much higher than 6th, I'm afraid, like we've kind of touched on. But as we've kind of not done in the last few years, we might have gave Solskjaer a bit too much time, but we just need to give Ten Hag time to get that system drilled in. They probably want to do half a job this season and then fill in those other gaps when it comes to maybe next summer or January, and get those other few players to fully utilise Ten Hag's system. So wait and see. I think like certain points through the season you'll have ups and downs. So in terms of FPL, there'll be some great times to jump on us, because I think attacking wise we'll score quite a lot of goals. I just don't trust us defensively. So be a transition season for us, I think. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. It should be more positive for you guys, shall we say. Right, so we've kind of touched on the top 4 and the title race. Just nipping back to the title race, Charlie. Sam gave us his opinion. Who do you see edging for first out of Liverpool and City?
Well, at the risk of making Sam feel even better about himself, I'm also going for Liverpool. I think it may be kind of making too much of an assumption here, but I feel like this season is just more of a transition season for City, with bringing in Haaland, who's obviously going to play the majority of games if he stays fit. They've just got to adjust more about how they play to adapt to him. Whereas I don't think that's quite the case for Liverpool. Obviously, they have brought in Núñez as well, who's started seemingly quite well. But it just feels like there's going to be less of a change of style for Liverpool with the Núñez transfer than there is with Man City and the Haaland transfer. They did look a bit off it in the Community Shield. They only had 2, I think, pre-season games before that, which doesn't feel enough at all. So that explains some of it, and they might be, much better going into the rest of the season. And of course, we've got to think those were effectively the 2 best teams in the league and some of the best in Europe going against each other. They're going to play a lot worse teams through the season, but I just feel like it's more kind of stable at Liverpool. There's more of an obvious route for them to win it. But yeah, similarly, I don't, like Sam said, I don't think it's really on for them to do both in that competition and Champions League. I feel like whoever it is, only one of them can win the Premier League and one wins the Champions League. I don't think they can fight on both fronts. But yeah, for me, it's Liverpool first, City second.
Fortunately, I won't make it a clean sweep because I can never back Liverpool to win the league. It's just, it's like 2 evils, isn't it, going Liverpool and Man City from a Man United fans' point of view. So I'm currently clinging on to the fact that Liverpool can't have the league and City can't have the Champions League. That's currently what we're clinging on to. So yeah, I'll have to back City, even though it'll be very close. I don't really want to back either of them, but unfortunately, I'll have to back City this time. You made the point about the changing of style. I'd argue Liverpool will have to do that slightly with Mane leaving, but obviously they've kind of got that ready-made replacement like Diaz. I don't know Sam's views on that, the changing style with Mane leaving, but I feel it might be totally incorrect. Like when you have certain games where like a Salah or someone would drop off his high standards, I feel like Mane was always there to score like vital goals that would still get you through. I'd be totally wrong there. I don't know what you feel from that, Sam, if there'll be any kind of change in style or how Nunes will be phased in.
No, I don't think there'll be a change in style. I think he's a ready-made replacement. I think, actually, to be fair, if you were going to lose Mane at any point, this summer was probably the actual point where you could afford to lose him. I'm pleased that both him and Salah didn't go. And to be perfectly honest, I thought one of them was going to go, I actually thought Salah would go rather than Mane. But now looking at it, having been through pre-season, Luis Diaz looks sharp as anything. Salah looks super sharp. I don't think the system's going to change. I think the only way you might see some change would be maybe switching from that 3 in midfield to a 2 and then push a 10 forward to sit in behind Nunes if they go to like a 4-2-3-1 setup or something like that. But overall, I think Luis Diaz is ready-made and ready to go. Obviously, they're going to miss some of Mane's goals in big moments, in big games. But a lot of Liverpool signings when they first started took a long time to, get bled into the system, bled into the style of the Premier League. Luis Diaz came in, played 3 days after he transferred from Porto, and put in one of the performances of the season. So I have no doubts that he's going to be a huge success this season. I don't think he's going to score quite as many goals as Mane did, but I think he's also going to get more assists than Mane got. So the trade-off there will be pretty reasonable. So not a concern for me with Luis Diaz and Mane.
Interesting. I think we need to drop all the way down now to the fight for the drop in relegation. I don't know how much either of you have seen for the new promoted teams, but I feel like they'll be in the fight. What are you thinking, Charlie, in terms of relegation? Do you give the promoted teams that have come up much chance? And what other teams do you think are kind of going to be in that scrap who obviously stayed up last season?
Well, it's always easy to suggest that the 3 teams that come up will go straight back down because that's just where it makes most sense. I think Bournemouth certainly don't seem to have much of a chance, especially if you've seen Scott Parker's comments recently. It seems to suggest he doesn't think they have much of a chance either, which is never good if your manager's saying that publicly before the beginning of the season. So I would probably have them bottom at the moment at least. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I've not really watched. I didn't watch any Championship football last year, so I don't really necessarily have much of a concept of those 3 teams that came up. So to speak more specifically about the teams already in the league that may go down, I think there's a couple. I think Everton certainly. I think it only just came out today or recently that it sounds like Calvert-Lewin's a doubt certainly for the first game of the season. He's had plenty of problems, obviously out a lot of last season for injury. They've obviously as well lost Richarlison to Spurs, so yeah, it feels like they're already struggling. Coleman getting old as well, bringing in someone else instead of him. So yeah, and it just feels like they're going to be fighting relegation certainly. I think as well down there'll be the likes of Southampton and Leeds. It just feels like their play style kind of allows for them to easily get pushed down. Be subject to quite high thrashings really, which is never good for morale and tends to kind of lead to a run of bad performances. And then I'd also just chuck Wolves in the mix as well. The Jimenez injury recently as well. And I just never feel confident about Wolves. I thought obviously they started really well last season, and then it seemed to tail off. I didn't know whether it was just that they were kind of comfortable, they were mid-table, and they effectively knew they weren't going to get relegated, so they kind of just dropped all performances really. But it feels like there is just a bigger kind of underlying thing going on with them, and it sounds like they're potentially changing system as well. Might be trying a 4 at the back as well, which that will leave them a bit more open and kind of changes which players in their team will slot in. Like, for example, Cody, I think, is still the club captain, but doesn't really play in a back 4. So it'll be interesting just to see how things change. But yeah, I think from the kind of Premier League, already established Premier League teams, I see those kind of ones certainly competing or having to fight to stay out of relegation.
Yeah, I've been doing quite a lot of pre-season research, shall we say. So I think you've highlighted quite a few teams there, and we're just going to add a bit of context. So like you said about Wolves with the formation, I've seen, well, from what I've been following people and what they've said in pre-season, they're going to change to a back 4, as you kind of hinted to, which kind of limits the appeal in FPL terms of their wing backs, because previously you'd see them playing 3 at the back, and you'd like have Semedo, Nate Nori all charging forward and getting involved a lot. So obviously it's not going to completely kill them as an asset, but it reduces them slightly. the Jimenez with Wolves is a funny one, because I feel like Jimenez is kind of holding Wolves back. So I'm not sure that's actually a bad thing that he's injured. Obviously, it leaves them with very limited forward options, but in pre-season, they've been playing, obviously, because they've got like one less player in defence, been playing kind of with a front 4. So like 3 attacking midfielders and a striker. At the minute, they have that striker, so they've kind of been playing Podence as a false 9, and then they have 3 behind them, so they'd have, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on in FPL terms, they've got Neto, they've got Morgan Gibbs-White, and then someone else in the hole behind. So they're definitely changing their system, so it's going to depend how quickly that clicks, but very similar as we've been talking to about Arsenal. They've been very good in pre-season, so if they can take that form, they've got a decent run to start with. I think that could go all right for them in terms of Wolves. And I just wanted to touch on the promoted teams as well. I was going to mention that comment you said about Bournemouth. Basically, I think it was probably about 2 days ago. Parker was complaining that he's not got enough defenders in, because I think he wants to revert to like a 5-back, but he's not actually got enough centre-backs to play that formation. So he's struggling with that, which doesn't sound great to start your season with. And the generally Bournemouth try not to invest a lot of money into the teams, and so they'll either try buy like younger players who they can develop, and then they know they've got them when they drop back down into the Championship. They might turn into kind of the Fulham and Norwich that we always see bouncing up and down. So similar to you, I'd have Bournemouth bottom. Fulham, I think, are going to be slightly different to what we've seen before. I think they're a bit more potent in attack, but they're going to concede quite a lot of goals at the same time. So I think they could easily beat a few teams like 3 or 4-0, but then they get hammered like 6-0 against like a City. So I think they'll probably go down because they won't like be able to keep enough goals out. I think they'll be the one that'll probably be like 17th or 18th, and they could maybe switch positions with like an Everton, Southampton. I think exactly the teams you mentioned I noted down as well. The Everton and Southampton one don't look particularly progressive as football clubs, especially Everton, and I think they're going to struggle. And just touching on the third promoted club like Nottingham Forest, that is the one that I think if you ask anyone, they're going to struggle to predict it. We've actually got an office at work in Nottingham, and obviously had all the excitement of the playoff final at the end of the season, but I think about 5 or 6 of their players were on loan from that last season, so they've purchased a lot of players early, and it's going to be how they bed in. So I can see they'll either be like a Brentford style or they'll finish 19th. I don't think there's going to be much in between. It depends how they click. And I know the manager, I think it's Steve Cooper, isn't it? Forest has been kind of fantastic for like the fans and everyone getting involved, and kind of gave the football club back to community, and it's kind of been a big thing about them. The crowd when people go to Forest is going to be pretty amazing the first few weeks, so watch out for that if you've got an away game at Forest the first few weeks, because they'll be up for it, shall we say. They've been a long time away. But yeah, I just wanted to give a bit of context on what I'd kind of been having a look for in those like kind of relegation teams. Yeah, Leeds, I'm not sold on either. I think Leeds, the only thing that might save them is they've signed 2 DMs, isn't it? I think it's Rocker and is it Adams? And so they've kind of replaced Calvin Phillips with 2 players who can play the same kind of role. So I think it might just be if they can, I think, like you said, they're one of those teams that they can easily concede goals and easily score goals. So it's just if they're on the right side of that swing this season, I think. But for you, Sam, how would you see the relegation? Is there certain teams that are just gone for you, or ones you're scared for?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really got too much to add other than what you guys have already covered, to be fair. I think the three that came up will probably be the three that go down, with the exception of maybe Forest, who might stay up, depending on how much of like an emotive atmosphere they can build up at Nottingham for their home games. And the only team that I could see slipping in and around there is Everton. I'm sort of quite incredible that we're talking about them as relegation candidates now after last season. A few people saying they might get in the top four. But yeah, I mean, they sold their goals in Richarlison and haven't really re-recruited. I know they've got Calvert-Lewin, who's going to be fitter this season. But equally, at the start of last season, they had Ancelotti going, didn't they? So, says a lot that a quality manager will get you places. But unfortunately, I'm not a believer in Frank Lampard being a Premier League manager, and I don't think I would actually think Lampard might be the first manager to be sacked this season. So that's probably what I think for Everton. But I think they might just have enough to scrap 3 points against the guys that are also in and around them, and therefore they might just stay up.
Yeah, I agree with you on Lampard there. I'm not fully convinced of him as a Premier League manager, so it wouldn't surprise me if it was first sack, like you said. Especially if Calvert-Lewin's out at the start of the season. I'm assuming they'll be going into a season with Rondon up front, which I'm not sure you really want to be going into a season with. But I think they've had financial difficulties, haven't they? So that's why they had to sell Richarlison and haven't been able to really reinvest that. I think past spending, where they spent quite a lot of money on certain players and not really gone well for them, has not ended up well. But yeah, we've kind of touched on the relegation there as well, so we've kind of touched on the main talking points in terms of top four title race and relegation. So we're going to move on to more of an FPL side of it. I'm sure we'll talk about a few more teams when we get into the FPL part of the pod as well. So we're going to start, I'll go back to you, Charlie. So switching all the way back to FPL, when you were first drafting your team, as I'm sure we've done a few already between us because we're sad like that, who are the kind of players, you must have players that have kind of been in there from the start and have rarely moved, kind of like 3 to 5 players?
Well, the ones that have gone absolutely nowhere are Salah and Trent, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the same for all of us. I think, it would be crazy to go without Salah, but I can see some potential argument maybe for going without him, but certainly Trent, I can't at all. I think, and it seems to be a lot of people have the same opinion, that Trent is massively undervalued still, even though he's 7.5. It feels like he should be at least 8.5, maybe even moving up to 9 at some point, given how much he offers. So those two are technically the only ones I think that have actually stayed in all of my drafts. The others I've kind of played around with. But as I was saying to you guys before, my draft's actually been the same. I've made no changes since Saturday, which I think is a record for me so far this off season. So the kind of players that have stayed in most of the time, I've kind of settled on going for Robertson over Diaz. I think triple Liverpool makes sense. And there's a bit of debate about who the third Liverpool slot is. And for me, I think it just works better. And I feel like I'm going to get better value out of Robertson. And also, who else would I say? Maybe Martinelli and Jesus have both been in my team the whole time, pretty much. By no means do I think these are must-haves necessarily, but I think Martinelli is the best value for his price or lower. Also, just seen the news as well recently that Smith Rowe's confirmed out for at least the first game week. So yeah, I mean, I already thought Martinelli was locked in that position, but he's now basically got no competition anyway. And Jesus, again, it just feels another case of someone that's probably priced a little bit low. He's basically been priced as a Man City kind of bench option or rotational option rather than a starting top 4 contender striker. So those are kind of the main picks that I've basically been in all of my drafts, and the rest have kind of just been toying around with.
It's going to be interesting when we look at our drafts, because I think I've been saying to you guys about my dilemmas, especially with Jesus, because I feel that he's that high owned that you're not really going to get much upside from it, and I would rather pick him up in like a game week 3 where he's hopefully already dropped in price because he's blanked against, for example, Crystal Palace. So that is kind of my unique view. I'm not sure a lot of people will say that, but I think he's that highly owned that there's some highly owned players that you need to back against, and that might be the one that I'll probably go against. I've been flirting with Martinelli, like you've said, but now you've said that about Smith Rowe, we probably will stay in there, but I'm just not convinced by it, especially that first game and the second game. Or Leicester, originally I was concerned about Leicester, but they seem to have a lot of maybe potential outgoings, but might change my mind on that Leicester fixture. But I might avoid Jesus. We'll discuss that when we get to a draft. I'm sure you both got him in at the same time. Yeah, the only debate I would say about Trent is if you wanted to go Robbo and then like Salah and Diaz would be the only time I'd drop Trent, because Robbo and Trent actually got the same attacking returns last season. So I'd argue if you didn't want both to be slightly differential, you might want Robertson, but I don't think you're going to gain that much that it's really worth it. So that's just one I thought I'd mention. And to add my thoughts into the fire, the top 2 I had at the top of my list was Salah and Trent that have not moved, unfortunately. And I was kind of doing it in tiers. I don't think those 2 have ever left my team. Very rarely has Cancelo left my team. And then there's some 4.5 million assets that, especially Pereira at Fulham, that I said, I think as soon as he signed for Fulham, I said this is the only kind of Man United player who's going to get anywhere near my first draft, and he's stayed in majority of the time. And also 4.5 forward in Archer for Aston Villa, because I'm either going 1 striker or 2 strikers, so I'm always going to have a cheap striker there. But a lot of the rest of the team has changed quite a lot. I've been having various discussions, especially a kind of a Robbo Diaz, Jesus kind of debate is where I've been struggling, but we'll get onto that a bit later. How about for you, Sam? Who are the must-haves for you? Who's never left your draft or close enough?
Yeah, again, very much the same as what you guys have said. I think you can do without Trent, and I don't think you can do without Salah. I think Neco Williams has been in mind since the first draft, just because he's a cheap defender who's pretty much always going to play. And particularly since the news is breaking about Schmeichel, I've had Danny Ward in as the 4.0 million goalkeeper, just in case he starts playing. Other than that, you know, they've chopped and changed a bit, but yeah, very much.
I knew we'd get
very much similar to everyone else, I think.
Yeah, I knew he was going to get to Danny Ward at some point. I knew he's probably in everyone's at this point. I just wanted to put a word of warning out there that he's not been fit the whole pre-season, and I think there was meant to be a behind closed door friendly yesterday, and I've not seen any feedback if he played in that fixture. But Leicester have been playing a different goalkeeper, I think was on loan. I can't remember if it was in the Championship, and he's not on FPL. So if before the deadline they don't realise, Leicester could start with a goalkeeper who's not even on the game, just as a bit of background to that. So you might think Ward is the only option as backup to Schmeichel, but there is another goalkeeper, and I can't see him coming in at 4 million. But it's just one to watch out for. I think currently now I'd probably put Ward in there, because I think when he's fully fit, he will be the goalkeeper, but he hasn't had the pre-season minutes, but I know it's a bit easier for a goalkeeper to get up to fitness, but just one to watch out for. But like I said, I'll probably still go with him just for the chance of it, because realistically no other 4.0 million goalkeepers really going to get a chance. But yeah, that's a good little start to the conversation, but now we're going to kind of look into different positions. So we're going to go it from the back, we're going to work from goalkeepers, defenders, and then move forward as we go through it. But to the start, each one of these, it would not be a Wilbur Talks FPL podcast without a quiz. So as we go through all these positions, you're going to have a little bit of a quiz to kind of get your thoughts back to last season and who were good assets, and start the discussion on where we could go potentially this season. So for the defenders, we've got a list here of 19 defenders who got 5 or more attacking returns, so goal or assists, last season. So we're going to take it in turns to name one. If you get an answer wrong, you're out, and I'll let the other person keep guessing until they lose. But it's more of a quick fire one, and we'll see how it goes. So is that all right for you both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 19 on this list, so they've got to have 5. So if they've got 5, that also counts 5 or more goals plus assists. So any attacking return. Anyone want to go first? I have no preference.
Don't mind, Charlie. You can go first if you want.
Okay. I'll let's just start with some obvious ones. So Trent.
Yep, Trent is correct.
Let's go for Robertson.
Robertson is correct. I knew they had the same amount of attacking returns because I've looked it up. They both got 14 returns, which is the joint highest.
Cancelo.
Cancelo had 12.
Reece James.
Reece James had 14, a joint with Trent and Robbo, even though he had 1,000 less minutes. Just to put that into perspective for you. I'm sure.
What a stat that is. Oh, I need that one.
Yeah. So, I benchmarked it against Trent. Trent, 14 returns in 2,800 minutes. James, 14 returns in 1,800 minutes. I'm sure that's a stat that Pete would love when he's doing the Trent against James debate.
Absolutely.
But I thought that was very interesting if you're thinking of James when it comes to an asset, how explosive he can be, depending on where he plays.
Let's go with my boy Gabriel. I believe he got exactly 5 goals from memory.
He did get exactly 5 returns,
Yeah.
so he did well with that one, right on the nose.
Matty Cash.
Matty Cash got 7, including that monster haul for me. Was it 28, 29 points in a game week? Love that.
One that I looked up earlier, I remember today. Diaz, he got quite a few assists, but he definitely got over 5.
I was going down the list on Wednesday, I got 7. It's because he was pretty much going in order. Except for your Gabriel one, he was pretty much doing in order, you two, to be fair. He was going down it.
Connor Cody.
Unfortunately, that's incorrect because he had 4, which I noted some of the ones down with 4 because I thought there's some ones that I was expecting you guys to say that I put at 4. So, unfortunately, you're out, Sam. So Charlie's got a nice little free run here on how many more he can name.
Well, I'm pretty sure because of how many times Chilwell was out, Alonso must have, because he's known for getting returns.
Yep, he was very high up. He was 5th with 9 returns.
It's tough now.
I think the highest you've got left is 7. So still a decent amount.
Would have thought Cresswell was up there somewhere.
Cresswell got 6.
Free kicks and corners, yeah. Have we said Van Dijk yet? He probably got quite a few headers.
We've not said Van Dijk. Do you want to say him?
I will say him.
That's correct. At least we won't have a tie for this quiz.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably about as far as I can go.
We'll go for another guess at least until you're out of lines.
Okay. Let's go, what would make sense? Maybe like a big centre-back. Mings.
That's also correct with 5.
Oof.
Scraping the barrel now. And there's still 7 names left on this list. But a lot of them are 5 and 6s.
Yeah, I don't know. Aspilicueta.
I actually looked at him because he had 4. He was one of the ones that had us 4, so unfortunately you've been beaten there.
Okay.
Well, but you have managed to get 5 extra compared to Sam, so you've got a nice boost going forward into the other rounds. So just going down the rest of the list, you had Matip with 6. You had Laporte with 6. Well, before I keep going down them all, is any that you were thinking, Sam, that could have been in there?
No, not really, mate. I only had 6 on the list, to be fair, so I think I was going to struggle after.
You've got Janssen from Brentford with 7. You've got yeah, he scored quite a few. Like got up from set pieces, scored a few, and got a few flick-ons for assists. You've got Reguilon when he played for Spurs. You've got Aït-Nouri from Wolves. You've got Michael Keane. You've got Dawson from West Ham, and then you've got Canos, who's been reclassed as I think he was a midfielder last season, but he's technically a defender this one. So I had him at the bottom as kind of, I'd allow it if someone said it. And you had a few that were on 4. Chilwell was on 4. I was expecting one of you to say Chilwell. Zinchenko was 4. Digne was 4. So there's a few that could have tripped you up. But yeah, not a bad showing. Nice lead getting into the midfielders there, Charles. So we'll jump into talking about defenders. So we've kind of talked about some premium defenders. I think when we're talking about positions, we'll kind of be talking about a lot about our drafts at the same time, so it kind of might merge the conversation together. So in terms of your premium defenders, so I'm going to say like a 6 million plus kind of range. We stick with you, Charlie. Is there certain players in that range that will definitely be in your team? Obviously, it's kind of talking what we've talked about. So Trent, you're probably mentioning going Robbo. Is there any other ones around that price range, the higher price range, that you're thinking about in your team?
Yeah, so at the moment, Trent, Robbo, and Cancelo are all in my team. For a long time, I think I started with James in my first draft, and he stayed in my team for a long time. But I've since going to Robbo, I think I've not had James in, which may not be a great idea, but especially given what you said earlier about the returns. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel a bit unsure about Chelsea at the moment. They're still subject to change, and I still think James is a good option, like we said, because of his attacking returns. It kind of negates the uncertainty about their defence. But certainly, yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with Cancelo, Trent, or Robbo. They all just, yeah, it makes plenty of sense. They're going to provide, in my opinion, much better value for the price they are compared to the equivalent midfielder or strikers. So I think that's why it makes sense that so many of these high-priced defenders should be fitting into your squads, because they just provide better value at this point.
Yeah, definitely. Sam, do you have the same 3 premiums in your team, or maybe not a Robbo? How is your backline looking?
Yeah, no, I have all 3 of said premiums. Yep.
I can say
on top of that, I mean, yeah, I think they're the only. I think they're the only premiums really that I think at first, similar to Charlie, I had James in, but I think Robertson's going to outscore James, and I think Trent and Cancelo are no-brainers. So.
I think I'm the reverse for both of you. I never wanted James originally, but now I've warmed more to him as the time's gone on. I'm not sure if that's just because I don't think Everton can possibly score a goal in that first game, so I know I'm guaranteed a clean sheet, or yeah, and the only doubt I have about James is in potentially playing right centre-back and not always playing wing-back. I know Chelsea are in the market for a lot of defenders, centre-backs and wing-backs. I've seen a lot of links about Dumfries potentially coming in as a right wing-back, so I'm slightly hesitant. I think this season it's a bit different to how we've seen other seasons, because we've still got a month of the transfer window left, so there could be quite a few changes in terms of that. Realistically, if I was Chelsea, I'd be wanting to play him at wing back, but if you've got Dumfries there, it might change if he's going to be in there. So I've got a slight doubt about him, but he is currently in the team. I've got the same 3, Trent, Robbo, and Cancelo, that aren't going to move. James, he's in there, but I'm not convinced he's going to stay there. He's the one, if anyone changes, or if I want to upgrade somewhere else, he'll be downgraded. Even maybe all the way to Nico Williams. He was in my draft quite a lot of times, but I think there's so much value in the defence that I've kind of gone for 5 decent defenders instead of just staying with that 4 million. So like, if we move down a range, so we're talking about that we've got a Trent, Robbo, and a Cancelo. So how are you complementing them, Charlie, in terms of mixture of structure? So have you got like a 5 million in there, or have you gone all the way down to Nico Williams to make up those other 2 spots?
Yeah, I've gone with the first. I've got 5 million. So at the moment, I've got Trippier, and with the plan of playing a 4-4-2, so he will be starting for me. the idea, particularly with Trippier, because he does have, let me just get it up, I think it's game week 3 and 5, he's got City and Liverpool. But that actually rotates pretty well with everyone's favourite 4.5 midfielder, Pereira, who plays Brentford and Brighton in those game weeks. So that was kind of my idea with Trippier, is to rotate him out for those 2 tough games. I think, I mean, there's a couple of 5s that I like. I don't mind Cash and Dino. I've been burnt a lot before with Dino, as we've talked about in previous pods. But I just don't like their longer term fixtures, or at least up until around about game week 8. They start well, but then get quite difficult. I think you could look at Gabriel from Arsenal, particularly with the first couple of games. It's been pointed out that our opponents have generally been worse, or some of the worst in the league for conceding set piece goals, which Gabriel is our best basically at doing. So I could see him scoring goals in maybe 1 or 2 of the first 4 or 5. But in my team, I've got Ramsdale, so I don't want to double up, and I've got the other 2 Arsenal assets anyway. And then outside of that, I don't really see many 5s that I like. I guess Walker, you could potentially talk about possible rotation risk down the line. But it's probably an interesting punt if you wanted to go for it, or it's whether you want to push up to maybe like a Perisic. I think Perisic kind of concerns me about the minutes. It looks like he's another one of those where it's a high risk, high reward. I think he's probably likely to get pulled off maybe before 60 or not start some games, but then also equally the games he plays, he's probably likely to do quite well and maybe even score and stuff. So I think I'm just going for a little bit of a, not necessarily safe here, because I don't think getting a Newcastle defender is by any means safe, but a more safe than certainly in terms of minutes, because Trippier is going to play basically all game. He's, I think, now the captain as well. So and on set pieces. So that's kind of my logic there. And then my 5th defender is Nico Williams at 4. Just obvious value really. He'll be on my bench anyway. There's no reason to go for a 4.5 as cover, I think, when you've got a starting 4.0.
Yeah, I think Lascelles is still captain, but I'm not sure if he's even first choice centre back anymore. But not 100% sure on that one. But does it make you feel more safe that Trippier's in my team as well? Is that Trippier's coffee in the same defence? Yeah, I've got the same kind of concerns with Perisic. I don't know if Perisic is maybe watch him for a few weeks and see if he gets up that fitness to play in the Premier League. From what I've heard about the last friendly where they played Roma, he looked very good linking up with Son on that side. So definitely a watch. And I think because Spurs have got a decent fixture first, I think it's Southampton. But then I think it's away to Chelsea. I know they're playing Chelsea. I can't remember what ground it's at. You can probably wait those 2 game weeks and see if you can get the fitness, and then maybe consider him after that. But it's one I've got my eye on. There is someone else in that range that I don't really want to say Alonso's name, but if Chilwell's not fit for Chelsea playing at the other wing back, he's one of those old romantics that you always want to go on, because you know he can attack. He can't really defend, but it's one to throw in the mix there. I'm surprised, unless I blanked out, that you didn't mention Zinchenko as a 5.0 kind of option in defender. Obviously, you mentioned Gabriel. Obviously, I know from your point of view you wouldn't have him because you said you've already got triple Arsenal. But would you not prefer Zinchenko over Gabriel if he was making that choice?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't really know. I think it's the uncertainty. Again, like I said when we kind of started the pod, I maybe swayed by the fact that originally, and this was before preseason, I kind of saw Tierney as the starting fullback when fit. He's not really had a preseason, and I think even at the moment, like I said, I think it's probably Zinchenko's place to lose because he just fits into the system. But equally, that kind of place, or at least from what I've seen in preseason, his place in the system is kind of pushing more into a left midfield position or left centre midfield. As an extra midfielder, and then whoever's playing in that position, usually Xhaka at the moment, then actually is the one that pushes wider and more advanced. So I'm not sure at the moment, and I think it's the uncertainty that puts me off. I think if I was choosing between the 2, I'd go with Gabriel because of the threat at set pieces, which actually tends to be quite good for us of late. And also, in some games, we do have a tendency, when we're playing teams that we should beat quite comfortably, we do have a tendency to pass around the back a lot, which is very frustrating from a fan point of view. But in terms of a bonus point of view, that's actually quite good for your centre backs, because they would tend to end up with a higher completed pass, which often ends up with good bonus points by the end. So I think if I was going between the two, I'd choose Gabriel. But like you say, because I'm tripled up myself, I wouldn't have either.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen Zinchenko in a lot more teams than you would see Gabriel, but I get what you mean. Kind of more assured minutes, I'm going to say. Because what would you say when Tierney's back that there's possible rotation for Zinchenko? I'm assuming in Europe there'll be rotation anyway, so it's probably a wait and see, isn't it, from that point of view? Tierney's always likely to pull something, isn't he? So he quite likes to get 50% of games just playing left back because he's not going to be fit, but that's a different issue. So we're going to go back to Sam, and he's going to tell me he's got Trent, Robbo, Cancelo, Nico Williams, and then he's going to say he's got Trippier in there just to match Charlie's exactly. Who's your missing defender, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I just need to. At the moment, I don't have Trippier. I have Matty Cash over Trippier, and I'm constantly on a daily basis rotating between Cash, Trippier, and Walker. And I think that's the only thing I'm sort of a little bit unsettled on, whether I go for the combination of. I don't mind not having Walker quite so much because I've got Cancelo, and I think double City defence that doesn't include. Basically, I can't see myself sitting here picking a City team that plays week in, week out, that has got Cancelo, Walker, Laporte, and Diaz, all four, and I haven't got Diaz and Laporte, so it just kind of makes I'm a little bit nervous about having all four of them. I think in terms of covering the City defensive assets, like having Ederson in goal was probably better than having Walker. I think I prefer Ederson and Cancelo than I do Cancelo and Walker, although I don't have Ederson, so another thing to consider. But yeah, it's literally, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I can't really add too much to what Charlie just said. But it's basically Cash and Trippier between the two at the minute, and I have had the exact same thought on the swapping Trippier and Pereira in for those weeks. So yeah, I think a lot of similar template teams by the sound of it.
Definitely, it'll get a bit more exciting in the midfield. I'm sure we will. But we haven't touched on goalkeeper, and you mentioned it, Sam. So who do you currently have in goal? I'm assuming Ward is there 4 million. Who's your first choice?
Yeah, so Ward's on the bench. He's firmly warm in that for now. I've got Mendy in goal at the moment just because I think, he's actually the only Chelsea player I've got in the team. And I think it's probably a little bit naive not to have any Chelsea players in the team. And as we suggested earlier, I think Chelsea will be stronger defensively than they will be offensively. And Mendy's a top keeper. He's made some big saves in big games. I think at 5 million, he's actually underpriced. I wouldn't have been surprised to see him in that 5.5 bracket with Ederson and Alisson. So, I think Mendy's good value.
Yeah, you've mentioned my goalkeeper because you said you considered it. I've got Ederson in goal. So I've got the Ederson against Cancelo. Well, double up on the defence. Probably the safest way to go because you probably only want one attacker anyway because of the amount of rotation. So probably not going to use that third safe slot somewhere else in the future because of the risk of rotation. Well, might come to regret it when I'm trying to get rid of Ederson in like game week 4 or something. But yeah, I think safe bet to go. I think the issue is you're just relying on the clean sheet, aren't you? He's not realistically going to get save points. So I'm considering maybe swapping him for someone who's got a bit more save potential, bonus point potential, but at the minute Ederson is in there. And I think we touched on yours, Charlie, that you've got Ramsdale in there because you didn't want to double up on Arsenal.
Yeah, I've got Ramsdale in at the moment. I think I can understand the reasoning for Ederson. I think personally, I've sneak preview until later on. I've got Haaland and I've got Cancelo. So I've kind of contrary to your last point. I think I want to leave that third slot open just in case there is one of the midfielders that kind of takes my fancy or makes it look like they're going to be there to stay. I think, for example, Foden. I know you don't have a great opinion of him necessarily a lot of the time, particularly FPL related, Will, but I think I want to have the ability to move to him if I need to, or someone, maybe a Mahrez or whoever it might be. and so I think at the moment I just want to leave that slot open. I think of the 5 millions, I think it is between Ramsdale and Mendy, and I just give Ramsdale the edge because I feel like he has a higher potential to make saves, whereas Chelsea don't seem to allow as many shots directly on target unless it's a goal. Whereas Ramsdale does seem to get, or certainly off the evidence of last season, tends to get a high number of saves. So, and then that's also going with him because I don't really like any of the 4.5 options at the moment. There's a couple that I'd be interested maybe if they were better fixtures, but right now I don't really like the look of any of them. So I think I want to be a little bit more secure in one of the 5 millions. And yeah, I'm happy with Ramsdale for now. I think Arsenal's are some of the best fixtures, certainly at that price. So I think it makes sense for me.
Yeah, I agree with your point on the 4.5 million defenders. I don't see a lot of value there really. When you're saying like Wolves or like Dallo is the best options, then you're kind of scraping the barrel for me. I'd rather just go up the 0.5 and get a bit of value, or even go to Nico Williams, which would probably be a better option than some of those. What was I going to touch on? Oh yeah, when you mentioned the City option, I think I'm just scarred by Ferran Torres from last season. When I mentioned him, and then he went and scored a hat trick, I'm like, I don't want to give myself the option to get a City midfielder because it would just hurt too much now. I'm not ruling out that Edison might be moved on in case I want an extra option, but currently he's in there. And I'm sure we'll come on to Haaland, etc. chat as we move through. Was there any other kind of defenders that we missed that we wanted to kind of touch on? I think we've probably covered most of the main ones.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, I was going to touch on potentially Cucurella if he moved to, it looks like Chelsea now, so at 5 million, is that a bad option? I'm not 100% sure. I think he'd probably more like to play like a left centre-back kind of role, but obviously he could play a wing-back as well, especially if Chilwell isn't fit or Alonso. I think there was rumours Alonso was going to leave at one point to obviously Barcelona, who can sign all these players, but I'm not sure what's going on with there, so he could be one decent buyer at 5 million to look out for. I know a lot of people put Cucurella in the teams expecting him to go to Man City, and then that hasn't really materialised. I wouldn't be surprised if City signed another defender, so watch out for their price if they come in. But yeah, I think that's kind of covered them from the defender point of view. So we better move on to midfield, and because we're moving on to a different position, you know what that means. We've got a midfielder quiz. And I was like, I need to mix this up a bit, and we can't just do like the same in every position, otherwise that's just a bit boring, isn't it? So just to get you thinking and visualising a bit more, I've got a list of 14 midfielders here, and these 14 midfielders scored at least 100 points, so 100 points or more last season. But all these 14 midfielders, their team wears a blue shirt. So they have to, their team that they played for last season has to wear a blue shirt. I say that from last season because I just have to put that in there. It doesn't really make any difference to the quiz, but at the end I'll tell you why I said that. It doesn't make much difference, but so there's 14 midfielders who scored 100 or more points who wear a blue kit as a home kit. Does that make sense? Any shade of blue.
Yeah, sorry, clarify that again. So wore a blue kit last season or are wearing a blue kit this season?
Last season.
Okay.
I'm saying that, but it doesn't make any difference. But I don't want
Well,
to. I don't want to give away the example.
Actually, no. It just worked in my head.
You
What I was about to say.
Yeah, I bet you've clicked why. Like I put that in there, but really it doesn't make any difference because if you said them first, we could rule that one out. But yeah, so there's 14. Does that make sense, Sam?
Yep.
Yeah, so any obviously shade of blue. So Charlie started last time, didn't he? So you just start this time, Sam. Give me one of the 14 midfielders who wears blue and scored at least 100 points.
De Bruyne.
Top of the list, of course.
The one that I was thinking about, but actually doesn't make a difference, is Sterling because he played in light blue.
Yeah, I've got it literally noted down. Moved from blue to blue, so yeah. I was like, I put it down as a note, but it didn't really matter anyway. Maybe if he'd like on Liverpool to City or whatever, it would have been a debatable one. But yeah, that's correct. Back to you, Sam.
Foden.
Foden is correct.
Let's stick with Man City. Mahrez.
Mahrez is correct.
Bernardo.
Bernardo is correct. I just literally named the Man City squad.
Mason Mount.
Mason Mount is correct.
Rodri.
Rodri is also correct. I was slightly surprised he was on there, but
I guess
it just got
100
to
is
be.
quite a low bar.
I'm going to say like the amount of minutes, and I remember him scoring the odd goal as well, which would have made a difference.
Conor Gallagher. Oh, actually, no, sorry. You said, well, he's now blue, isn't he?
I will let you
kind of
off.
mixed
I will let you off and let you do another guess because
they're red and blue.
I had him as the warning at the bottom because he was the only one I found that could cause an issue. So I'll allow you to guess again, given the
Thank you.
requirements.
Tielemans.
That is correct.
Maddison.
Yeah, number 2. I'm surprised no one said him earlier. Only KDB had more than him.
Trossard.
So I don't know TV2. Well, yeah, because when I'm saying blue, I'm not counting stripes.
Okay. Oh, right. I mean, I would say overall their kit is mostly blue.
I think
White
Brighton is more blue than Palace, but like.
Yeah, I should have mainly specified full blue. So like you've had examples where you've got City, Chelsea, Leicester.
Okay.
Like, what do you think, Sam? Should I give him one last chance because my rules are?
I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty sure I've got them all. So he can have it again if he wants. I want to go out in style.
Actually, no, well, yeah, I have a, what was it, a 5-5?
I literally think I've got them all. So
yeah, I feel like you've had 2 strikes, Charlie. So you're
yeah,
out.
okay, fair enough.
So I feel like that was legitimate enough to give you 2 chances. So go on then, Sam. Reel them all off.
Okay, I mean, there's one that's very
What if you get the next one wrong?
Yeah, Harvey Barnes.
That is correct.
My main man, Damari Gray.
Yeah, he was 103, very close.
103. Oh, we might be in trouble then.
So I think there's only 1, 2. There's 3 left.
Yeah, I've got 2 of them. I'm sure about 2 of them. One of them's a punt.
So currently you're 3 ahead of Charlie on this round. So you're currently 2 behind. So if you get those 2, you're level. And that punt could decide if you take the lead into the final round.
So Gordon from Everton.
So Gordon had exactly 100.
I know that because I was just freezing looking at him a couple of days ago. So I thought if I was going to have any Everton player, it would probably be Gordon. But then I realised I'm not stupid. So
the 2 left.
And the other one that I'm pretty sure on is Jorginho, Chelsea.
Yeah, that is correct. Slightly more than
But
Gray.
the other one is a little bit more of a punt.
Okay.
I wasn't 100% sure.
Well, nothing to lose because you got. Lead or not.
I'm going to go with Grealish.
No, that is incorrect. The other player is from City. You've literally
really?
named the whole midfield except for this player. He wouldn't. He's kind of not always in the first team. But didn't he scored? Did he score twice on the final day? I know he scored once.
Oh no! Gundo.
Gundogan, yeah.
Gundo. Fair enough.
Giving you flashbacks there. But yeah, you got your 5 points back there. So typically, I said it could be a draw. So now you're drawing going into the final round.
I'm going to struggle on strikers for sure, but midfielders. I've spent so long looking at midfielders this week. I could pretty much roll off probably every midfielder squad over 100 points, I reckon. Disaster.
Well, it depends on the question. You never know. I might just say name any striker that played in stripes. Any striker that played for Liverpool between 1993 and 2006, and we're on. Maybe not that quite. Maybe not that lucky. Right, so that's gave you a taster for midfielders, especially if you like Man City midfielders. So we're going to move on to the midfielder spot. So we've kind of touched on that Salah has never left anyone's draft, so I feel like Salah is a set and forget, so we don't really need to mention him much. I think, from my point of view, the fact that he's on penalties as well. Like, if there was any realistic opportunity for me to drop Salah, the fact that he's on penalties as well just rules that out completely for me. I've seen quite a few people want to go for like Diaz, Robertson, and Trent, which I can understand it, but I think again Salah will be the highest scoring player in the game, so why would you particularly not have him? So it's a no-brainer, I think, from all of us, as we've mentioned. So we'll go to you first, Sam. So we can't literally name exactly the same midfielders, but I feel like in midfield we have a bit more variety. Forwards, I'm not backing there's going to be much variety. So what kind of structure are you going for in midfield first? Sam, like kind of like an 8 million mid, and then some cheaper ones, or what's the structure looking like? Who are the kind of more set players that you're going to keep in that midfield along with Salah?
Yeah, so I've gone 13 for Salah, and then 8, and then 2 cheaps. Well, 3 cheaps really, and then just so that I frees up funds for the strikers. So I've gone with Saka. I think, as Charlie mentioned earlier, I think about Saka taking a penalty when Martinelli and Jesus were on the pitch. I think probably gives an indication that Saka's going to be on penalties. So I think that's a good one. He's probably going to get some decent minutes as well. So I've gone for Saka at 8. I've gone for Neto for Wolves. I know we were sort of going in a little bit on Wolves earlier, but I think Wolves have got a decent start to the season. And on top of that, if Jimenez isn't fit, I think Pedro Neto could actually play. I think he was used predominantly wide last season, but he could even end up playing through the middle. So, I think I've gone for Neto, and I've got Leon Bailey from Villa, who last year was tipped to be my biggest thing. Then I tipped him as my biggest flop, but I think pre-season he's been really good for Villa. So I've gone for Salah, Saka, Bailey, and Neto as my starting midfielders, and then I've just got a fodder midfielder on the bench in Jacob Murphy at the moment, but likely to swap for Pereira.
Okay, yeah, it might not be different to mine as I expected. I think Charlie's might be slightly different. I'll go to Charlie first before I come back to mine. I'm just going to say, touching on that point that you said on Neto, so I think I was saying it before, so like what I've seen is, well, the thing is obviously Jimenez is injured and Wang is also injured, who would generally play up front, but Wang probably will be back within a few weeks, so either Wang will play as a centre forward in that Wolves team, or as they've done in the last game also, they've put Podence as a false 9. But because he's like a false 9, he's dropping deeper, and it allows like your Netos and generally gives White on the other side to push on a lot more. So either way, I feel like Jimenez being out of that team probably makes Neto even slightly better, you could argue. So we'll come on to my bit in a minute, but I don't disagree with the Neto pick. How about you, Charlie?
Yeah, I don't disagree with it. I did start with Neto. I don't have many more. So my structure's pretty similar. So obviously the Salah, and then I've got the 8 million, and then I've got 6 and 5. The 8 million is still kind of choppy and changing for me. At the moment, I've got Mason Mount. It could be a number of different players. It will be an 8 million. It's just working out who. It could be Kulusevski. I think at the moment it's stuck on Mount, but we'll see. Chelsea fixtures are good enough going forward that I think I'll probably keep him. But yeah, like I say, we'll may be swayed by different news that we get in the week. I then got Martinelli. I think technically Saka at 8 million could be probably the best 8 million, but also I think Martinelli's the best 6 or under. So I prefer going Martinelli with a bit of extra cash and using that money elsewhere, because I think he may not match Saka, but I think in terms of value for money, I think he will match him, regardless of the penalties. They're both on opposite sort of free kick, opposite corner sides, so I think they both have as close a potential to each other for getting points. Other than I do think Saka is on penalties. There's a bit of a debate about whether it's whoever gets fouled is the one that takes it, because that's been the case. It's just that Saka's happened to be the one that's fouled quite a few times. Yeah. But I don't actually believe that. I don't think Arteta would necessarily allow that. He's too much of a control freak to kind of allow that kind of not chaos, but kind of randomness. I think he wants to stick to someone that has taken them reliably, which Saka absolutely has. But yeah, like I say, I still think Martinelli is just the best value for that price. And then yeah, I have gone with Bailey rather than Neto. There's that 0.5 saving because Bailey's only 5, and I just couldn't bring myself to keep a Wolves player in my team. I think it does feel like we're maybe going a bit too harsh on them, but I do have them predicted to be bottom half and struggling for goals. So I don't see why, when kind of working that through, why I would then go with a player from their team. Certainly in the first 4 fixtures, probably I just prefer the Villa fixtures, and I fancy Villa to do better overall in the season. I fancy them to score more goals. And from what we've seen, like Sam said, Bailey's had an impressive pre-season. Gerrard had some good comments about him, and he's effectively worked his way into the team. He wasn't a guaranteed starter at the beginning, and now he probably is. I think all Villa fans predict him to start now. And like I say, just that extra 0.5 saving, so it kind of makes him a no-brainer for me. And then similarly, I've got, like I mentioned earlier, Andreas Pereira as my 5th, who will be on the bench until those tough games for Trippier when he rotates in.
It's a funny one because I feel like some players just take a pinch of salt, don't you, when you said they've had a good pre-season. Because I've heard a lot of people saying, "Oh, Almiron's had a great pre-season, he scored 6 goals," but it's like one of those ones that you could take a punt on, but I'm not fully convinced by it. Like, they've got a decent first fixture, but it'll be interesting how some of this pre-season form translates into the Premier League, and obviously a lot more difficult tests, shall we say. So I think I've got more kind of towards Sam's team based on the Neto pick because, well, I thought we were going to have a bit of variety in midfield, but maybe not. So my structure's slightly different. I've literally got Salah, and then it's just cheap everywhere because I feel there's a lot more. Like, really, on the 8 million one, I wouldn't know who to go for. I'd rather just have Martinelli in there to cover the Arsenal kind of asset. I'm not even that convinced about having Martinelli, as I kind of touched on earlier in the pod, because I don't like Arsenal, especially for the first game. So currently I'm lining up with Pereira, who we said obviously is the very cheap one. Bailey as well, that we've talked on, so full set there for him. I've got Neto as well that Sam has said, and then Martinelli. So it's kind of a blend between both of yours currently. But these midfields lots have changed. At one point Almiron was in there, but he was as a placeholder really until I worked out who it was going to be. I've also had Aronson in there from Leeds because Leeds have got a decent run to start with. I saw their pre-season game. I think he got 4 assists in their pre-season game the other day, Aronson, for Leeds. So it's kind of portraying that they won 6-2, so they still can't defend, but they can score a few goals. And Bamford, I think, did get 2 goals, so they might have their focal point back. So I've considered him as well. So I think we mentioned in your guys' defence, you kind of had like Nico Williams in there. So I've basically got a more premium defender instead of having an 8 million slot in the midfield is currently how I'm lined up. But like I said, on Reece James, he might easily move to something else. On that 8 million, I think it's a big debate for everyone. It's just who do you pick and at the right time, isn't it? I think that's a big one everyone's going to struggle with. I think you mentioned it, Charlie, that it's Mount at the minute, but it might change. So
yeah, I think the thing on that as well, though, is I think they all have their plus points, and I don't think you can necessarily be wrong going with any of them. Certainly the ones that we've talked about, because they all have decent enough fixtures and a potential to do well. The other bonus of having them is that you can switch between them. Whereas what's your most expensive midfielder outside of Salah?
6 million.
So yeah, so you would have to find the extra money if say one of these 8 millions does start kicking off and you need to get them in. You do have to take the money out from somewhere else. Whereas if you already start with the 8 million, it does allow you to move between them a lot easier than if you don't have them at all. And that's not the main reason to do it. I don't think you should do that just for the sake of it. Like I said at the beginning, I think that I think all of those 8 millions have value in themselves and the potential to do well anyway. But it's just an added bonus that it allows you to kind of pick or swap between them as you need to, rather than having to find the money elsewhere, I think, which probably just saves you maybe an extra transfer somewhere.
I think it's the point, because I don't see myself wanting to jump on those 8 million midfielders in the first part of the season. And if worst came to worst, within 2 transfers, I would be able to make it happen, because I'll just drop down a defender. Yeah, it's a valid point, and I think a lot of people are doing it for structure-wise, that it can change like that. But I think, like, if I have Martinelli, that's covering the Arsenal point of view. If we'll talk about forwards in a minute, someone else might cover the Arsenal point of view, so Saka's out of the question for me. Mount is hit and miss. I've got James in there, which is a bit of Chelsea coverage. I think if I was going for an 8 million, Kulusevski would be quite high up there, because I think he's going to get a lot of time, even though Richarlison is signed as a backup and is a cheaper way into that Tottenham attack. So I'm not overly convinced by anyone in that 8 million range, so that's why I don't think I really need it. Obviously, you've got like Maddison there as well, who could end up somewhere else. If he ended up at like a Newcastle or someone, you might even think of wanting him in your team, but it's probably not going to get resolved straight away. And then Diaz is blocked because I've already got triple Liverpool, so I'm quite comfortable, because I don't know. I think the money invested in defence, as we talked about with the wing backs, is potentially more explosive than one of those £8 million midfielders. That's my kind of take as of now. That could easily change within the space of a week, but that's how I'm seeing it for now.
Yeah, I think that is the best. In fairness, is the best argument for doing what you say, and missing out on the 8 is, if you are prepared. What you said originally about if you're prepared to kind of ignore maybe the clamour to go towards one of those 8s eventually, if they start doing well. If you're able to ignore that, then potentially longer term, the big 5 at the back, if they are, like you say, the wing backs or whatever, long term may offer the better value. You just have to ignore all the hype, and that's very difficult to do. I don't think I'd have that same control. So I think I need that player in there to be able to switch between them, so that I can feel like I can jump on them if I need to.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me this season is just not going with the hype on certain players. Like, if someone has a great first 2 or 3 weeks, actually consider it a good option, rather than like if someone scored like 5 goals in the first 3 weeks, don't just assume that's going to continue. I think we had like I know we had the West Ham bandwagon at the start of last season, but I think I just need to think about them before just like wasting a transfer going forward. So I've got a lot of cheap options in there which have decent fixtures to start with. So the majority of the time I'm going to have to choose between a midfielder, and a decent option is going to be on the bench. But I'm just going to have to kind of deal with those consequences if I pick the wrong one. But at least I know I've always got an option for the time being. I think realistically, out of my 15, you've got Archer, who I don't expect to play. Then you've got Pereira, and then I'm going to have like a cheap midfielder as that first sub. So I might get stung a bit if I've got a decent option. Like, say if I went like Aronson or someone and put him as first sub and he did well. But it gives me a bit of coverage, and I don't mind the options in that kind of price point. There's a few, depending on the fixtures, that you can change, because like we've said about Bailey, I think his first 3 fixtures are decent, but I'm not sure I'd want him after that. So I feel like there's quite a few decent value picks around that range. It's just getting on the right one at the right time. So people are talking about jumping on the 8 millions on and off and that, but I'm seeing it slightly different. That I'd rather have my set defence and then play about with some little tweaks in the middle of midfield on cheaper ones. But I've also got in the back of my mind, we've not kind of touched on the strategy yet, that obviously we get unlimited transfers in the World Cup stage, so we've got to use that wild card at some point. So if I'm not happy with the team, I'm fine when we get to game week 4 to just wild card it, because I know I've got that and I need to use it before. I think it's game week 16 you've got to use it by. So I think if there's certain risks you want to take from any team's point of view, I think this is one of the best seasons to do it. If you really like someone for like the first 4 game weeks, I think you just need to take the punt on them, because you've always got that back with a wild card that even if you use it in like game week 4 or 5, you've only got to get through 10 game weeks, which isn't the worst way to do it. It's quite a good way to get aggressive and maybe get ahead and maybe break the template a bit, because as you've seen when we've gone through our teams, it's been quite similar in certain scenarios. Probably got like 3 or 4 main differences between the teams. So I quite like that strategy. So even if I need to shift the money about, I'm not opposed to wildcarding early and resolving that if it worst comes to worst. But yeah, that's for later down the line. So we kind of touched on those 8 million midfielders. Was there anyone else that kind of stood out to you? I feel like we've missed a lot of midfielders out, so I'm going to go back all the way to the top. So obviously we've got premium with Salah. From your point of view, Sam, has there been any other premiums that you've considered from the midfield, like a Son, a KDB, even maybe a Sterling? I'm not going to put Bruno in that bracket. Have you ever considered having like 2 premium midfielders rather than like putting the money elsewhere?
No. So I think Son is I think Son is fairly priced, but is also, as a result, not as good a value as having Kane as a striker option for the first few fixtures, particularly as Kane will probably be on penalties. I think De Bruyne, there's always an element of rotation risk with Man City, and City have got like a really good opening stretch of fixtures, right? So, I mean, West Ham, Bournemouth, Newcastle, Palace, Forest, Villa, Tottenham, Wolves, United, Southampton in their first 10. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they got 30 points. So, like, and they don't even have to play their strongest midfield to be able to do that. So I think De Bruyne to me is a better option than Son if you've got Kane, based on price point. But also De Bruyne typically, from what I've seen, tends to sort of really kick on at the end of the season. Second half of the season, he's always in the question for Player of the Year based on his second half of the season performances. So for me, I think Salah's a non-negotiable, and then as a result, I want to have a big boy forward in there, some big boy defenders. So you've got to try and find space for another one. I don't think it quite works out. I think there's a shout for some of these 8 million players scoring not too dissimilar totals to maybe Son and De Bruyne over the course of the season, and as a result, you might get similar or better value with them. But yeah, I think it depends what happens. I think someone asked me an interesting question today, that if Salah got injured in game week 1 for the rest of the season, who would you put in, Son or De Bruyne? And I think the answer for me would then be De Bruyne rather than Son this year, because Kane is Kane and will just get loads of goals. So I think for me, I haven't considered the second option in terms of premiums in midfield, because I just don't think. I think the money can be better spent in other areas of the team this year. In previous years, and particularly last year, we're all lining up with like 8 million midfielders at the start of the season because the striking options weren't as lucrative. But now you're looking at 5 of the top 6 teams have all got a striker that's got the potential of getting 20 goals in the season, I think. So I think now you've got to start to really focus on spreading the funds appropriately rather than just packing them all into midfield.
Yeah, it makes sense. In one of my previous drafts, probably like a week ago, I was considering KDB. I think he's struggled previously in previous seasons from injury and not having a full pre-season, but this season he's got a good pre-season behind him, so it wouldn't surprise me if he did well to start with. And I would, originally I was quite tempted to start with KDB, ignore Haaland entirely, based on Haaland potentially not being fit to play 90 minutes. My view might have changed slightly, the fact he had 90 minutes the other day, but I'm not too opposed to KDB, because I think he will go on.
Sorry to butt in. I just think with City this year, having Haaland, who will play every time he's fit as the 9, I think you're going to get less of a spread of the goals from City. You'll get a higher concentration coming through Haaland, which makes him a very attractive asset. But it probably also means that you're basically looking at a lower goal tally for the midfielders in and around. So Foden's, Mahrez, Haaland might even take penalties, in which case, the midfielders become even less of an attractive option. I like De Bruyne. I think he's a brilliant player. I think he's a great FPL asset most times. But I think if you're picking between De Bruyne or Haaland, I think Haaland is cheaper than De Bruyne.
Yep.
It's non-comparable at the moment. Like you've got to have Haaland over De Bruyne if you want to get lots of points in FPL. Like it's just in my opinion. Like I can understand why you want to look at like differentials versus Salah and the high ownership and all that kind of stuff. Like De Bruyne, but De Bruyne doesn't even have that lower ownership that it's like an absolute steal to jump on him. Like he's got 15.5% ownership, and like even Son as well. Son has 25.5% ownership. So these players, and I know that that's super small in terms of Salah's 60% ownership, but like they're not even like that great a differential, in my opinion. And Salah will just outscore them both. And if Salah doesn't outscore them both, I'll retire for next season's pod.
Famous last words when he gets that game week 1 injury.
Yeah, he'll probably still outscore them both.
On the bench. Yeah, just in that game week 1, he'll have done enough damage in the first half hour.
Yeah. 37-0.
Yeah. I think it's questionable on Haaland. I'm just thinking of his past injury record. I don't think he's going to be fit the whole season. I think I've been convinced at the start of the season to probably go with Haaland because the games are 1 a week and he's going to be fine for that. But when you're playing 3 games a week, I don't think Haaland's going to play every game. I think he's going to be part of the pep roulette. And I think at some point, especially if Haaland gets an injury, Alvarez is going to be an interesting option from City because
I agree.
They could play false 9, but it's like from what I've seen already from him and what we've seen from his previous club, he looks exciting. And I think especially he presses as Pep wants his players to press. He's very much kind of replacing Jesus for them from what I've seen so far. So I think he's like 6.5 million, which is ridiculous if he comes with an option at some point in the season. So I agree Haaland's probably the best option to start with, but I feel like at some point in the season there's going to be quite a few times where people have got him in their teams and he doesn't start for City because I don't think he's going to be outside of pep roulette.
But if we're in agreement that Salah's a non-negotiable and we've all got Salah, and you go for De Bruyne as well as Trent, Robertson and Cancelo, you cannot have a premium forward to rotate between. And the premium forward rotation this season between them is just like one of the easiest things an FPL manager's ever had to do on paper at this point in time. Like if you just take one of Kane or Haaland, you can flip between those two, Ronaldo, Darwin Núñez, freely for the rest of the season based on who's got the best fixture. Maybe not Núñez, because I think quite a lot of people will triple up Liverpool early doors. But, I mean, no one's got, I'd like to think not many people have got 3 Spurs players. And I don't think many people are going to have, maybe 1 United player, let alone 3. So if they have a preferential fixture and Ronaldo gets back in preference and hangs around, like let's not ignore Cristiano Ronaldo in the question here. In terms of a point return, he still scored a hell of a lot of points last year. So, I think as much as I see what you're saying, I do see what you're saying. Even if you're not going to go Haaland, I still think there's better ways of spending the money than putting De Bruyne in midfield.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go to Haaland, but it's just a point for discussion that you could go elsewhere.
Yeah, sure.
I originally, this is probably a week or so ago before the Community Shield, I was going to go with 3 premiums. I was going to go with Salah, Son and Haaland, or the other way around, so Kane and KDB. So you had coverage from a premium from Liverpool, City and Spurs, because I think there's obviously Salah's kind of non-negotiable, like you said. There's a lot of fuss about Haaland, and I think a lot of people are going to have Haaland in there a lot of time, and especially the Spurs assets are kind of going to get quite slept on. I think the thing with Spurs is that Kane or Son are going to be involved like 80% of the time. So it was something I was definitely considering, but I agree there's probably better value than doing that, and I will probably end up, it's going to be Salah and then Haaland or Kane to start with. I think there is realistic ways you can get those 3 premiums in there. I think there's a lot of value in the game this year where 3 premiums can work for you, I'm just gone on the mindset that the premium asset is generally the one you captain. You can't captain 3 of them in a game week. So
Yeah.
like if you just keep 2 there, and that if those 2 can cover you for those captaincy decisions, then you're fine.
Yeah.
I think 3 is probably just going a bit too much when you could easily go down to like an 8 million, like we've said, and get a decent coverage. So
No, I agree.
Yeah,
Sorry, mate. I agree with you in terms of I think Salah, Son, Haaland is good. Like, I'm definitely not in any kind of argument against having those 3 premiums. I just think the specific combination of having Salah and De Bruyne forces you into an alley of Salah, De Bruyne, Kane, and I think Salah, Son, Haaland is probably better than Salah, De Bruyne, Kane. I think over the course of the season, as like if you had to pick one set of 3. So,
well, because an interesting strategy. Obviously, I'm just going off on one now. How I was looking at it before, I'm probably not going to do this. I was originally going to start with Salah, Son, and Kane, and then based on how Haaland and KDB performed in the Community Shield and Game Week 1, I would decide to take Son or Kane out for one of those 2, because I'm not fussed by West Ham away for City in the first fixture, so it would have gave me the double Spurs for their decent Game Week 1, and then pick KDB or Haaland, whoever I thought was better at the time for Game Week 2, but then you're booking in a transfer, of course. But that's one of the considerations I thought. But like I said, I probably won't go with that. Just an interesting way to approach it, I think.
yeah.
It went on for tangent there, and Charlie probably fell asleep. No, I'm joking.
I was just in agreement with everything you're saying, so I didn't think I needed to add anything. I think the only thing, I would just kind of echo your point you made towards the end, Will, about, for me, I think 3 is just too many. Particularly, but like you say, the value you get from the premiums is when you captain them, and like you said, you can't captain 3 in a week. 2 is okay because you're because of the funds we have, but also because you're kind of covering between the 2 for when one of them doesn't have a great fixture, for example. 3 just is too much, is both in terms of taking away from other areas in your squad, but also you just don't get enough value out of all 3 of them because you only can captain one of them.
Yeah, well, I think we covered most of the premium ones there that we'd be considering anyway in that discussion. I think Sterling could become a decent option at some point, like the 10 million, but I don't think many are going to jump straight onto him. Because obviously you mentioned you got Mount in your team, Charlie, so you think Chelsea could do half decent, but I feel like that 10 is just a bit too high for now. I feel like it will become an option. You could even say the same for Bruno, but not to start with for me in that kind of premium range. Just having a look in terms of, I think we've done decent coverage because we've kind of talked about premiums and we've talked about 8 millions. Is there any other kind of midfielders out there that we've kind of not spoken about that we want to mention?
I think it's just kind of, we'll see as we go along. I think there's the likes of maybe Zaha, Bowen possibly. Ward-Prowse is often talked about as one that kind of ticks along.
I think
Coutinho maybe even with Villa as well. There's quite a few around the kind of mid, but kind of between maybe the 6 and up to about 8.5 that has potential, but you don't want to start with them either because, like for example, Bowen, they start with Man City. You don't want to do that. And there's just not the fixtures there yet, but they have the potential to go off if they have the right set of fixtures. So there may be more kind of just wait and see how they look as things go, and then, like you said earlier, because we've got these kind of regular potential to change our squad because of the transfers and the wild cards coming more regularly. It kind of allows us to take a bit more stock more frequently than we would previously. So it's easier to kind of just jump on those as and when they come up rather than needing to kind of go straight from the off.
Yeah, I think that kind of range is very fixture dependent, isn't it? Because certain teams haven't got a decent fixture run at the start, like for Crystal Palace, for example. We're not considering them from the start of the season, but it doesn't mean they're not good options when we get like 6 or 7 weeks down the line. But it's just, you can see that a Neto pick, for example, that we've talked about is purely based on the fixtures. If they had like a Crystal Palace run, we probably won't even think about it. So we'll tweak our thinking as we go through the season. I was going to reluctantly mention Man United in there because I think there's not too bad value in like a Rashford and a Sancho, but I'm not convinced by them straight away. Again, it's kind of a wait and see. The fixtures are pretty mixed. at the start of the season. So I don't mind a punt on one of them. Like, Rashford can be explosive and is the cheaper of the two. If I was going for like a nailed-on asset, I'd be picking Sancho, but I wouldn't be putting that kind of value into a United asset with the uncertainty. But they'll definitely become an option at some point in the season, depending on fixtures. And well, we'll move on forwards in a minute, and I might talk about someone else on Man United. But I think we've covered majority of players there. So it'll be definitely that mid-range is very fixture dependent. And you can see there's a common theme around these cheap midfielders that we're having in our team, so it's quite clear there. So should we move on to forwards? If you're ready for another quiz. Anyone want to guess what this one is? who wear polka dot shorts? So this time we're going to look at, obviously, forwards. There's 10 players on this list. So obviously forwards are known for the goal scoring, but we're not going to look at that because we don't want to. You need to name the forwards that assisted 5 or more goals in terms of FPL, like it's registered on FPL. Sometimes I know some other places give assists when it's not really. But according to FPL, as of last season, I need to make a point on this. I am doing these as forwards as of they were a forward this season. They might not necessarily. There could have been players that changed position. I need to put that disclaimer in there. There's been a few changes between positions. If they're a forward on FPL this year, but were like, for example, a midfielder last year, they are in this selection. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, just about.
If someone gave me an example, I don't want to ruin it because it kind of ruins.
I can think of one.
I know what you mean. Yeah, you're all good.
Because there's a few possible ones that could throw up, so I thought I'd put a disclaimer out there straight away.
So if they were a midfielder last season, but they're a striker this season, that's fine.
They will be on this list, yeah. So I've got at least, I'll give you the number, there's at least 3 examples that I've found. Not necessarily they've got 5 or more, but I know at least 5 that are either on this list or very close to being on this list. So that's one to watch out for. I will allow you one kind of, like I did with Charlie and the other one. If there's a bit of debate about the position, we will talk about that when it gets to it. But there's 10 players who are strikers in the FPL this season that got 5 assists or more, so I need you to name that 10. So we'll go back to Charlie to start us off.
Right, let's start with England's best central defensive mid, Harry Kane.
I wonder where you were going there. Yeah, he is top, of course. Especially after last season. You, Sam?
Interesting.
I thought this was a bit more interesting rather like the forwards one. There was limited things I could do, so I was like, that's a bit more interesting to think about the assists.
So we'll go for Jota.
There you go, there's a prime example. That's what I was trying to demonstrate.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's without giving you someone's name, it was very difficult to give you an example. So obviously a midfielder before, but as a forward on FPL this year, he got 7 assists, so that is correct. Kane got 11 for reference.
Let's hope for many more this season. Gabriel Jesus.
Yep, Jesus got 8. So he was actually 3rd in the list.
There's so many that I'm just like, don't know, did they get the assists? That's the problem.
I've noted a few honourable mentions that got 4 or 3 in case they come up.
I'm not going to get many here. I think this is an open goal for Charlie, to be honest.
You have to remember there's only 10, so even getting like 2 more.
There's only 10?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay,
so there's only 10, so even getting maybe like 2 more could
Yeah,
put
I
back
think
in Charlie's court.
I think I've got 2 more. I'd like to guaranteed.
All right. Ronaldo?
Unfortunately, that's incorrect.
No, damn it! He's such a selfish. Hate the man even more.
He's on the list because I put him at the bottom because he got 3. Because I thought because it would be a potential one that came up.
You know, earlier on in this podcast, I suggested Ronaldo as a striker. Ignore that. Scrap it. Useless fraud.
I bet all three of those he was like shooting as well. It wasn't a pass.
But in fairness, if you look back at the highlights for Man United, there were so many chances he put on a play.
No one wants to watch highlights from Man United last season. Not anyone. No one. Not one person in the world.
There's quite a few chances that he just laid on a plate for mainly Bruno and then a few for like in Alanga. He should have easily had double that, but unfortunately the quality around him couldn't finish like he can. But yeah. So anyway, Charlie, you've won, but obviously I'm going to give you a chance to name some more.
Well, the two I was pretty confident on were Antonio and Richarlison.
So Antonio was second in the list with 10, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Is Ivan Toney on there?
Ivan Toney is there, yes.
God's sake. Not they would have made a difference. The only other one I had was Ollie Watkins, but I don't know if that's right.
Watkins only had 3.
Okay, fine. So I'd have only got one more anyway.
Yeah, so Richarlison was also correct that Charlie said. So you've got 4 left. All 4 of them are pretty meh. Like, if you got them, it would be quite a fluke. One of them, with 7, was a midfielder last year and now is a striker. But I don't think it's someone you would think of straight away.
It might be who I was just thinking of. Because I mentioned Tony and Buemo. Because Tony got enough goals. Yeah, Tony got enough goals that Buemo would have assisted. Yeah.
But when you were saying that, I thought you were going to say Havertz, because Havertz got 4, and I was expecting one of you to consider Havertz because he's now a striker, but he's not in the list. So you've got 3 more. 2 of them don't even start regularly.
I don't know anymore.
Like kind of a rotation. So you've got Danny Ings with 6. And you've got Iheanacho from Leicester with 6, and then you've got Jimenez with 5. So I think Jimenez is probably a bit more gettable than the other 2, because like Ings and Iheanacho didn't have a lot of minutes, but when they're on the pitch, seem to make an impact off the bench. Or I know Ings started a few, so at least I managed to split you. That's a change. So well done, Charlie. You win the first one of the season. Sam with a lot of work to do, especially when it comes to his assistant forward. So we'll move on to the striking category, which probably will be the quickest discussion we've got. So come on, Sam, since you lost, let us know how your forward line's looking, what kind of structure, and how you're currently lining up.
Yeah, I've got Kane, Jesus, and Greenwood. Greenwood is just like the 4.5 million bench warmer.
Yeah.
Kane, with, as I said before, just the plan to just rotate between him and Haaland and maybe Darwin, depending on how things go for Liverpool. But I think probably just between Kane and Haaland. And I think Jesus is clear in that bracket of 8 and down. I do quite like Ivan Toney as an option as well, but I think Jesus will probably outscore him. So.
Yeah, I feel like that might be a pretty standard front line we'll see in a lot of teams. Go on, Charlie. How much does yours differ? Maybe the 4.5 differs?
The 11.5 differs, yeah. I've got Haaland and Jesus, and then my 4.5 is Archer. But yeah, he could be changed for anyone, really. Yeah, like Sam said for Jesus, I don't think there's any argument about him. Best value for his price. I don't really like any of the ones lower. I did consider Tony, but I just feel I want to wait and see on Brentford as well because of the lack of Eriksen now. They clearly were much better with him creating. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens with them. And I don't like anyone kind of below that, anywhere below 7. I did toy with the idea of maybe someone like Watkins because of Villa's opening couple of fixtures, but once I'd already had Bailey in at 5, I didn't want to double up, so yeah, didn't go any further with that. And then, yeah, Haaland over Kane at the moment. Reasoning on that really was I'm definitely captaining Salah game week 1. So I didn't feel like I needed Kane in. The only reason I would bring Kane in would be if I was to captain him, because I'm almost certainly captaining Haaland game week 2 against Bournemouth. And that week Kane has Chelsea, like we mentioned before. So it just feels like, in terms of the slightly longer view, and I think sort of going forward as well, I would just be happy with Haaland over Kane. Of course, that may change, and we may start to see things a bit differently because it is a bit of an unknown in terms of Haaland coming into the team. But again, like we said before, it feels like the Man City kind of way of playing, or the avenues that they're going to put into to try and score it is going to be much more different. It's going to be much more focused on getting the ball to Haaland in the box to then score. Similar for our kind of conversation on De Bruyne, it feels like he's not ruined as an option because I think they'll score more goals overall, but ultimately he's going to be trying to feed Haaland rather than necessarily taking on shots himself. So I feel like things are set up for Haaland to do really well, but it's just a case of we'll see if it actually comes through. But yeah, I can see that there's plenty of argument for both, but yeah, for me, I just give the edge to Haaland for now.
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate argument either way, isn't it? Whichever option you go with. So, like, the whole of pre-season, Kane's just been sat in my team, and then until the Community Shield, I wasn't even considering having Haaland to start with. But now I think I'm probably going to go Haaland, similar to what you've said, Charlie, because I'm going to want Haaland in game week 2, so I'm like, why do I just not have him to start with and not waste the transfer switching from Kane to Haaland when I know I'm going to do it in game week 2 anyway, and just take that risk in game week 1 if Spurs go off. So I've gone from one point where I had Kane and Son in my draft having no Spurs at all. So gone full circle there. So I think at the minute I'm like 51% Haaland to 49% Kane. So currently I think I'm going to have Haaland as that premium spot. Go into the total opposite end, same as Charlie with Archer, who I think is slightly more likely to get minutes than Greenwood, but I don't think either of them are going to get many minutes at all. I think if Villa play 2 strikers, Archer will get quite a bit of game time, but I think Greenwood is third choice striker, isn't he? So if they only play one up front, I think he's got less routes to it. So if I was recommending the 4.5, I'd say Archer, but keep an eye out, especially if anyone transfers. I know there's been rumours about Dalat from Man City, obviously going to like Southampton or something is 4.5, so there might be a better like 4.5 by the end of the transfer window that we don't know about so far. And so my third striker isn't Jesus. Who do you think it is, guys? It's not long term at all. It's just
Callum Wilson.
Yeah, he's got it in one.
Briefly considered.
Got it in one.
I was going to say I briefly considered him.
Because, well, I've legitimately said I don't like. I've never liked Jesus' game week 1. Game week 2 I didn't particularly like, but game week 2 I'm a bit uncertain about now because Leicester haven't really signed anyone or they look like they're losing some assets. So I'm not sure about that game week 2, but game week 1, I've jokingly said it, 70% of the game own Jesus. When he blanks in game week 1, I'll just sit there and get him for a few 0 points cheaper when everyone sells him. So
yeah, you wait till Forest beat Newcastle 1-0 with a Neco Williams assist, mate. Then who's laughing?
Well, I'll still be laughing if Jesus doesn't get anything. We'll see.
Or when Callum Wilson breaks down, his hamstring's gone in the first couple of minutes.
But like I said, it's short term anyway. So my full idea is
very much short term. If he does a hammy on 2 minutes, that's for sure.
With the thinking currently, he'll probably end up as Jesus in game week 3. That's currently the thinking. So it's just giving me slightly more chance, I think, of getting some returns. But people may argue that. But I think I'm probably going to have him in there for now. And I think that's the kind of, like, he's highly owned at 70%, but taking a risk on him for 2 weeks isn't going to end my season, I don't think. Like, famous last words, he scores 4 against Palace, but I don't expect Palace to score, concede 4 goals. But they've looked half decent in pre-season as well, so I expect Palace to be very similar to how they've been before, quite tight. Like, Arsenal might win 2-1, but if Jesus scores a goal, then I back Callum Wilson to score twice. So it's just kind of a mini shootout. So we'll see how it goes. I mentioned earlier, I toyed with before I had Jesus and I had Almiron in midfield. I'm like, I can't have Almiron in midfield. I'll keep the Newcastle asset and I'll move it to someone slightly more reliable. So yeah, double Newcastle for me currently for the first game week currently. But there's certain things subject to change. I think if I change anything, it'll be the midfield slots, and then maybe James in defence, and maybe Edison. There's not going to be a whole lot of changes for me going forward. And I think we've spoke about the kind of Kane and Haaland rotation. I think similarly with how we said for the midfielders, there's quite a lot of forwards around that 7 million, 7.5 million, which are going to become options at some point. But I don't think there's many that stand out as a great option for like 5 to 6 game weeks at the start. So I think that's why everyone's defaulted to Jesus. I think Arsenal's like up to about game week 8 fixtures are really good, and then that premium striker where you can more trust the Spurs or a City. So I don't think there's much value going anywhere else for now until you've got a bit of an idea how some of these teams play and how everyone's looking. I don't mind a punt on Vardy at the start. I'm just putting that one out there as well. But that's another punt.
I don't mind Ivan Toney. I think he's got a decent run of fixtures, to be fair. And he's on penalties for Brentford as well. So
in fairness, yeah, like I just got Tony's up. Like his first 2 aren't fantastic, but then like from 3 to 7,
like his first 8 as a package are pretty good.
Yeah,
right.
you know when Jesus does his hammy in the second game, instead of going to Jesus, I'll go Wilson to Tony. So planning ahead. We'll see how it goes, but anything can happen, of course. So I think we've kind of discussed every position there. There's no one we missed in the forwards that we want to touch on. I think probably when we get further into the season, we'll mention some other names, won't we? I think earlier in the transfer window, I don't think it's going to happen now, but there's rumours of Brozier going to West Ham, but I don't think that's going to happen now. If Brozier ended up somewhere at 5.5, that'll be quite interesting, but not likely to happen now. But yeah, we need to keep an eye on those as we go through the season. I think the key point I've been trying to do, and I think because of the value in FPL this season, is just target the bigger teams to start with. Obviously, you're going to have a few players in between, like a Neto or something, but like your City's, well, more so probably Liverpool. I think a lot of people will be tripled up on Liverpool. Maybe even Arsenal to a certain extent, just going for those more reliable teams to start with. And then if we see certain talents emerge later on, then we can deviate from the template a bit more. And I think everyone's slightly scared at the start, aren't they? And they want to go a bit template. So there's certain players that can do a lot of damage. If you didn't have a Haaland or a Jesus, they can do damage, but you've got to take certain calculated risks, and we will see. So I think the last bit we have before we end, guys, I know it's been a long one since it's first one back, but you'll have to allow me for that. So my last point I gave you was some low-owned options, kind of differentials, that you think will have a great season. Not necessarily has to be straight away, but certain ones we're going to look at later on in the season or now, like kind of under 10% owned. So Sam, who comes to your mind when we think of low-end players currently?
Okay, so I've got a few, but they're by position.
Yeah.
So try to just go with 2 per position, really. I think in terms of goalkeepers, Lloris at 4.9%, going to be unpopular option as it's quite expensive, but I think he will have a good season and will inevitably be in the top 3 or 4 point scoring goalkeepers. And I also fancy Nick Pope to have quite a good season at Newcastle. Obviously played very well when he was at Burnley, got a lot of points for shot stopping, but definitely contention for some more clean sheets at Newcastle. So Lloris at 4.9%, Pope at 4.6%, I both think are good. If they can both stay fit, Chilwell at 5.6% for Chelsea, although maybe not quite so much if Cucurella ends up going. Kieran Tierney at 2.6% ownership for Arsenal could be a nice differential there. One that I had included in a couple of drafts for a little while is St. Maximin, and he's at 7.5% ownership and only costs 6.5. So I think he is considerably better, in my opinion, than Almiron as an option, but equally has a very poor injury record. So we'll see how it goes. But if he stays fit and Newcastle get going, St. Max could be like really, really good option. And then in terms of forwards, I had Tony at 5.3. I think Tony's going to, again, have a decent season. I don't expect Brentford to set the world on fire, but I don't think Brentford are going down. So I think Tony's decent. He's on pens as well. And I also had, I did have your man Callum Wilson, but I'll probably let you cover him. And Ollie Watkins at 3.8% ownership, I think is also good, because although there's the contention between him and Ings for striker places at Villa, you can see probably Watkins can play wide of the 2. So I feel like Watkins is probably going to be playing most weeks for Villa at 3.8%. I think it's decent. But you can see this season how strong the template team is in terms of selection, because there's literally like the same 5 or 6 players in each position all over like And it's not even like players creep over 10% ownership. It's like there's these sort of cliffs between like 15% ownership down to like 7%. It's quite incredible to look at, really. So there's a few options, but I think they're more long-term look-ats at the moment. And by the time they get there, they might be high percentage anyway. So
yeah, all interesting ones, getting us thinking, especially when we get to good fixture runs for them. Yeah, I had a quick look at St. Max because obviously I said I've got Wilson and Trippier, so I'm back in Newcastle the first few at least. I think there's probably.
I think of all of those, St. Max is probably the most interesting because he probably offers the most opportunity to like explode out the blocks and really get going quickly. Of all of those ones, so I don't know. I think it's unlikely St. Max is going to make an appearance because I would need 1.5 million to bring him in, and at the moment I've only got like 1.0 maximum to play around with. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a bit more to play around with in midfield in terms of options than there is striker, so that's kind of why I've gone for Wilson, because I don't feel there's that. To start the season, there's not many great value forwards, so I've gone for that striker spot for now, pending the deadline coming up. I'll touch on some of mine before we get to Charlie's. I forgot to mention when we got to strikers, if Ronaldo leaves and we don't sign another striker, the Martial at 7 million, like, obviously, we're not the most fantastic team. We've said we're going to be probably 6th, but the thing with how Ten Hag plays, I'd expect there to be goals. So being a striker in a top 6 team for 7 million, you can't go far wrong with that. Obviously, that is really pending if Ronaldo leaves or not. I kind of did it by team, so unfortunately, I had to get United assets in somewhere, so I thought I'd slip him into this bit. I mentioned Malacia at left back. I think at some point, if he's been doing quite well in pre-season. I think it's 4.5 in FPL. I think the way Ten Hag plays, he'll want him playing at left back rather than a Shaw. I think Tellez is going to go on loan, so it's only Malacia or Shaw who can play at left back. So I'll be interested in maybe a few months. I don't think it'll be straight away if Malacia plays quite a bit more, especially when it comes to like when we've got European fixtures. It'll be interesting to see what left back is favoured in the league and in Europe. So we just want to watch out for that thought from United. So like I said, I've done it by team, and then I was looking at City. One that slightly interested me was Ake because I think he's 5 million at City, and Laporte is currently out injured. And if City don't buy another fullback, Ake has been known to cover at fullback. So I thought that was quite interesting. Obviously, you got a bit of risk and you're using a City slot, but it was quite an interesting one for that value if you're looking for a more value pick. Because I think him and Walker are the same value. It's a bit of an interesting one. And then I've got a lot of City assets written down here because Pep Roulette, you're always going to have the midfielders all kind of around that 5 to 10% depending on how they're performing, unless someone goes crazy. So I think we've mentioned some. I mentioned Alvarez earlier.
Little breaking news, transfer business coming in hot off the press.
Look at this breaking news.
Fulham have signed Bernd Leno from Arsenal.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Exactly the most exciting.
I was expecting some like groundbreaking. You know that Frankie De Jong's finally decided not to come.
No, don't worry. I was gonna sell the Ronaldo dream for a minute there, but unfortunately not.
As soon as you said Fulham,
sorry to disrupt your flight.
As soon as it was Fulham, I was like, okay, I've switched off there. Unless it's like a mega signing that we weren't expecting. Just those City mids, and we mentioned Alvarez earlier. I touched on Vardy, I've touched on Maddison a bit, because the Leicester boys, that front three, Vardy, Maddison and Barnes, not much ownership currently going into the season, and I think the game week 1 and 3 are really good home fixtures, so watch out for them to start with. And then I touched on Aronson for Leeds that I think could do well, and Leeds have a good start to the season, and also Bamford coming back from injury. I think a lot of people won't consider until they've seen him back to full fitness, so he's just one to watch out for. Not much ownership at all. And then I had other ones that we've mentioned. Wilson, of course, who's in my team, and then a sneaky shout for Alonso if Chilwell doesn't come back into the fold very quickly. So I think that covered, and then they had Almiron here, which he keeps us every conversation we get. Almiron's great pre-season form, of course, I have to mention him. How about you, Charlie? Who was your kind of one to look out for?
Well, yeah, we've covered a lot of them, obviously. I also had Watkins. I talked about the three Man City mids as well. That I think it's because, like you say, no one really knows exactly who's going to start. But Foden at 6.2, Mahrez 5.8, and Grealish at 4.8%. They're all very lowly owned. And whilst, like we said, the plan's probably going to be that everything goes into Haaland, they should benefit from getting assists that way. I did have Sterling down 6.9%. You mentioned him earlier, Will. It's too much of an uncertainty at the moment, and also the price point isn't just right. It's 10 million. It's a bit too much for kind of my second mid, and I'm not going to downgrade Salah for him. So it's a difficult price point to get to, but could just see him going off. And then the only other one I've got is Bowen, who's currently at 8%, which is maybe a little high because of the fact they're playing Man City. But if you take that Man City game out, which you can't actually do obviously in real FPL, but if you brought him in the second game week or moving down the line, it's a much better run of fixtures than maybe you kind of initially think if you're just looking at a Man City fixture getting in the way. Because then they go to Nottingham Forest, then Brighton, Villa. They're at home to Spurs, which from memory they tend to do actually quite well, or at least give Spurs a good game. Chelsea, Newcastle, Everton, Wolves, Fulham, Southampton. So these are actually pretty good games for West Ham, or certainly games where they should be scoring goals. And if they score goals, you would expect Bowen to get something in it. By no means do I think he will kind of equal what he did last season. That was a bit of an anomaly, in fairness. But I do feel like there's going to be some good value from him and or people moving to him at some point through the season based on the fixtures.
Yeah, I don't mind Bowen actually from the start because I'm pretty sure he scored twice against Man City in the last season, so
true.
It's not like you can write off the Man City fixture at all. I mean, I think I'm interested to see how they get the new striker into the fold. If he seems more like a target man rather than Antonio, so I think if he comes into the team at some point, that Bowen might not be the man running on to some of these through passes and being more in the build-up. So I'm interested to see how that works, but I don't mind him as a pick from the start. I think if he was 8 million instead of 8.5, a lot more people would consider him. But because there's so many price at that 8 million, everyone's fixated on that 8 million slot and don't want to go slightly higher. But it's an interesting one. Yeah, it could be. I think it's again like you said, like it could just be a one-season wonder. So you don't want to. You've not got like 3 or 5 seasons to go back on and say he's going to be consistent. If he does it again this season, come the start of next season, a lot of people probably just put him in there because they know he's going to be consistent. So. Yeah, I like that one. It's like you said on Sterling as well. I was going to put Bruno into my mix, and I'm like 10 million. It's not really an option until some point in the season, but there will be periods where these different options are half decent. So I'm sure we'll discuss it over the weeks to come. But yeah, I think that kind of covers us for today, and I think it's good timing because I think Sam's AirPods have died at the same time, which is quite funny. So that was perfect timing. So I think we covered everything, Charlie. I can't think of anything else that we need to
all good for now.
cover on. Yeah, it's been an extra long one, an extra pre-season long one. I think Sam can still talk, but he just can't hear us, so that's quite funny at the same time. But we shall call it there, and I appreciate everyone for. Well, I would ask Sam if he's got covered everything, but he probably can't hear us saying it. It's quite funny. But yeah, we'll call it for today, guys, and we'll probably try and be regular at the start of the season while we've got fixtures every week. When we get to the point where there's midweek fixtures, it might be getting a bit more difficult, but we'll try and be on schedule between us. So thank you everyone for listening, and we will be back again very soon. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone.